You are tuning into the Lehigh Low Ego, High Impact Mindset podcast. I'm your host, Volkan Emre, along with a dynamic team of Kellogg School of Management alums. We are here on a shared mission to uncover the mindset that drives impact and success. On Lehigh, we have thought-provoking conversations with incredibly successful entrepreneurs, business leaders, and investors from around the globe. We uncover the mindset that drives them, allowing them to make a high impact without losing themselves to ego. Now, let's get started with today's episode. Welcome to today's episode featuring one of the most respected figures in marketing, Professor Tim Calkins. As a distinguished faculty member at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management, Tim specializes in marketing strategy and branding. His insights are grounded in his extensive real-world experience, including a successful tenure at Kraft Foods, where he managed notable brand revivals and product launches. Professor Calkins is the author of books Defending Your Brand and How to Wash a Chicken, both of which are considered as essential readings in the marketing field. Tim is also the co-academic director of Kellogg's branding program, where he shapes the next generation of marketing leaders. This episode is co-hosted by Kelly Megel, a seasoned marketer, growth expert, senior executive, and a distinguished member of the Kellogg Executive MBA Alumni. We are recording this podcast in the Global Hub building of Kellogg School of Management. Professor Calkins, thank you so much for hosting us in your office today. It is truly a privilege and honor to have you on the Lehigh Mindset podcast, and we look forward to having a great discussion with you today.
Well, it's great to be part of this, and welcome back to the Hub.
We have some warm-up questions, and we are going to be firing them away when you're ready.
I am ready.
Okay. Coffee or tea?
Coffee. 100% coffee. All the time, all day long.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs. So I grew up with both dogs and cats, but we have a dog, and I think our family is we're more dog people, I think.
By the way, thank you for the coffee. You actually made me coffee before the podcast, and it tastes amazing. Thank you very much for that. With that, mountains or beaches?
Mountains.
Oh.
So, yeah, I'm a big fan of skiing and hiking in the mountains and all of that. And I'm fairly fair-skinned, so I don't last well on the beach. And I have to be there for about 10 minutes, and that's about it. So mountains for me.
Wow. Same, preach. Sunscreen all the way, 100 SPF.
Favorite mountains in the U.S.?
We have a place out in Breckenridge, Colorado, so I think I would say the Rockies.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Okay, so do you text or do you call?
Text. I like calling, and I think calling is great, but texting is so darn efficient. I'm going to go with texting.
Okay. Music or podcast?
That depends on the situation. Podcasts, if I am walking to the train or walking over to the Global Hub. Music, if I am exercising and doing stuff like that.
Are you a PC guy or a Mac guy?
PC. I'm a PC, although I probably should switch over. It's a lot better for video and all on the Mac. But, usually I'm teaching, and most of the setups are all oriented towards PCs. So PC for me.
Drive or fly?
I'm going to go with fly. Nothing like a good road trip, but flying is just darn efficient and a great way to get around. I mean, if you're on a nice flight, I'm happy to go anywhere in the world. It's fine. One of the nice things in my role now, I get to travel somewhat, and I am happy to go anywhere, and I love traveling.
Amazing. What's worse for you, doing the dishes or doing laundry?
I'm going to go with laundry. Dishes, I don't have really a problem with. You get a strange sense of satisfaction from loading up the dishwasher and undoing it in the morning and all of that. So I'm going to go 100% with I'd rather do the dishes, and I'm not a big fan of doing the laundry. Also, I am so worried that I'm going to either shrink everything or put the red stuff with the white stuff, and everything ends up being pink. It's just very stressful and very difficult. So I'm going to go with the dishwasher.
Okay. Waffles or pancakes?
I'm going to go pancakes on this one. I do like waffles, but pancakes are just straightforward and tasty, and I'm going that way.
Classics. What is the first app that you open up when you wake up in the morning?
When I first wake up, I jump into email and I see what came in. So it's really the Outlook, whatever it is. It's checking out the emails, and there's always that first scrolling through of just see what disasters happened over the night, and that's where I begin.
Can we start by giving our listeners a brief introduction to your background and your impressive and impactful journey to becoming a Kellogg professor?
Sure, I'd be happy to walk through that. So I began my sort of educational journey as a history major in college. And when I got out of college, I went to the world of consulting, as many people do. I was with Booz Allen in New York City and worked on a lot of different projects there, different industries. Then I went back to business school. I went to Harvard for business school. As the former dean here at Kellogg said, everybody gets to make one mistake. And so I went back to HBS. And then for the summer, when I was at HBS, I decided that I liked consulting. I liked that kind of work, but I didn't love traveling constantly, and I didn't love bouncing from company to company all the time. So I thought corporate strategy would be great. So that summer, I went and I got an internship in corporate strategy at Boise Cascade, so a big paper company out in Boise, Idaho, in the corporate strategy group. Now, that was a fabulous summer. Loved that. And I learned, though, two things that summer. One is the paper industry is a really tough business. And also corporate strategy is sort of not a real job. There's not like, it's very hard to build a career in that area. You know, fundamentally in the world of business, I think you have to be good at one of three things. You've got to make something, finance something, or sell something. That's really it. It's those three things. But corporate strategy is a little bit off on its own. So I said, after the summer, I said, boy, what am I going to go do now? And I decided that selling it was really where I was going to go. And that's marketing and sales. I decided to go to a company where I could really learn something about marketing and get experience. And so at the time, there were three sort of great companies in marketing, at least by reputation, P&G and General Mills and Kraft. And I ended up landing at Kraft. So then I went to Kraft and I was there for a long time. I worked on a lot of different brands, worked my way up the ranks, managed Parquet Margarine and Miracle Whip and Taco Bell and A1 steak sauce and lots of different brands. But along the way, I started teaching, first at a little business school, Keller, part of DeVry. I was teaching advertising there. And I was doing that just at night as an adjunct on occasion. And then eventually I had a friend who was at Kellogg, and he said, hey, you should be teaching at Kellogg instead of at Keller. And so I came and I talked to the folks here at Kellogg and Deepak Jain, who was the dean at the time. And right at that moment, they needed somebody to teach the marketing strategy course. So I began doing that in the evening just as an adjunct still. And I did that for a number of years. And eventually, though, Kellogg wanted me to teach more classes. And right at that moment, I didn't think I was learning a lot at Kraft. You reached that point. I'd been at Kraft for 11 years. I didn't think I was learning a lot of new things. And quite honestly, it was sort of time to go. And so then the question was, do I go to another company or do I jump over to Kellogg? And I decided to jump over. So I came over to Kellogg at that time. And when I came over, my model was that I would spend, at least I was thinking, I would spend a third of my time teaching and a third of my time speaking and writing and a third of my time consulting. And so I bounced over. That was sort of the mix. And I bounced over. And I've been doing that pretty much ever since. Now, the model doesn't work, though. That whole a third thing I learned, that doesn't really work, right? One of those has to be primary, is what I learned.
Okay.
You could be a consultant who teaches and writes or a teacher who consults and speaks, but you have to make one of those primary. So now I teach at Kellogg a lot, and I'm full-time here at Kellogg. I've been here for a number of years. I teach marketing strategy and biomedical marketing. But along the way, I've written some books, and I've worked with a lot of incredible companies and really interesting people. And it's really been a fun mix of things that I get to do.
Amazing. Thank you for taking us through that past sort of walk through your career to getting to Kellogg. One of the things we always like to ask is the sliding doors moment. That time you took a path or you made a choice that changed the trajectory of your career. Of that you just walked us through, what was your moment? What did you learn from that moment?
Well, no doubt it was the moment when I left Kraft and came over to Kellogg. because that was sort of a scary moment. And when I did that, I came over to Kellogg and I took, at the time, it was a part-time clinical associate professor role. I think that was the role. And I jumped over and I took that role. But when I did that, my salary went down by 90%. So that was a 90% drop. And that will focus the mind because all of a sudden your income's just gone to like nothing. But I said, you know what? I don't get the opportunity like this very often, so I should try it. And then I said, if it goes well, I can keep doing it. And if it doesn't, I can go back to a company. And after a couple of years, I could go back the other way. So I went into it saying, yeah, maybe this will all come together and it'll all sort of work, or maybe it won't. If it doesn't, though, I always have a plan. I'm a big believer in having a plan B. Like if this thing doesn't work out, what are you going to do then? And I had that plan B, and so I jumped over and I was okay taking the risk.
I think it's so interesting, too, that you talk about the plan B and having a backup. Sometimes taking the leap means that you may not know how it works out. So how do you talk to our listeners about taking the leap and leaning into something to see if it really can come to fruition?
Well, I think you have to take leaps and risks, but I think it's really important to think about, what if it doesn't work out? Like what comes next? So I have so many students, they come and they talk to me about jobs. And I just had somebody here today in my office talking about, you take this job or you take that job. And one of the questions I always ask them is, what's the next job? So after this job, what's the next one? And I think if you look a couple moves down the line, it's the same thing, by the way, with formulating strategy, like competitive strategy. It's not a question of what's the good move right now. It's what's the good move that will let you make another good move that will lead you somewhere productive. So when you think about taking risks, I always think about, well, what's the upside and what's the downside? And are those manageable? Mm-hmm. So when I came over here, that was my debate, though. Do you come to Kellogg and try this? Or do I go to a company job at that time? But when I looked at the company job, quite honestly, that option, and I loved what I did at Kraft, but I knew that was sort of risky because when you move jobs sort of 11, 12 years into a career, that's a scary moment because you go into a new company at this middle level. You're expected to do a lot. You're probably getting a big salary, but you don't know anybody and you have no resources, you have no connections, no relationships, and you have to deliver results really quickly. Quite honestly, you have to deliver results before you can actually do anything that will contribute to those results. So it's really sort of luck. And I said, boy, if that didn't work out, at the time, we were settled here in Chicago, my wife and I, and she's a doctor. And I was like, she would probably move with me to another city and take that, if I went to the next job. But then if I was moving again, then that would have less enthusiasm. So then I looked down that road and I was like, darn, I don't know if I love that road. Let's try the Kellogg thing and let's take the leap there. And it's really worked out really well.
And what does your wife say looking back on that now? Was she grateful for the chance that you stayed? Was she supportive of it? Like, how did she manage through all of this? Because frankly, I had a fantastic husband who helped me through the program, and it was really nice to have that support. So I'm curious how your wife and your family supported you through your transitions.
Oh, she was very supportive. I mean, it certainly was easier, though, because she's a physician. And even when I came over, we were fine. That we weren't taking a huge leap when I came over.
Sure.
But she was really supportive of it. And quite honestly, being a faculty member at Kellogg gives you an incredible amount of flexibility, which is really astonishing, because it's so different when you're at a company. It's interesting. When you're at a company, you have a boss and a manager, and they sort of tell you what to do, and you see them all the time, and you interact with them a lot, get a lot of direction. But then you come over to the academic world, and very often it's not totally clear who's your boss anyway, nor is anybody telling you really what to do, which is in a way very unnerving when you first come over. But you're like, tell me what to do right now. And they're like, well, I don't know what you do, whatever you want. Just do something productive. And once you get used to it, it's amazing. I tend to get overcommitted. I tend to do too many things, but that's just my own problem.
It's a little entrepreneurship too, which is very interesting.
It's so entrepreneurial because how do you spend your time and where do you allocate your energy and your resources? It's a question that you sort of think about. And what's different about it is that nobody tells you. In a company with a manager, you can say, okay, how should I prioritize my projects? In this world, there's just nobody to tell me that. It's So it's really fun. It's really hard, but that's sort of the joy of it. So it's been great to shift over, and it's been
all the emotions.
Great experience.
Yeah. So it was honestly in this freedom like you had, and having you in Minnesota in this alumni gathering in February earlier this year, it was really fantastic. So thank you very much again for visiting us, and I hope we will see you again in Minnesota sometime soon in the future. So with that, I'm curious, like we have been talking about Kellogg and your journey. How would you define the Kellogg impact on your life, like so far?
Well, for me, Kellogg has been terrific. I mean, it's been the platform. It's been the place where I've spent most of my time. And at the core, what I really do is I teach classes with Kellogg students. And Kellogg students are amazing. They're super smart, and they're energetic, and they're, gifted and talented. And the opportunity to interact with students on a regular basis is really is terrific. It is not easy. It's not always easy, and it's not always fun. But on balance, it's a real privilege and an honor to be able to work with the students. It's interesting. The reason I say it's not easy is because Kellogg students are like so good. I mean, they're so smart. They're so experienced. They bring amazing company experiences with them and all over the world. And so to try to find a way to connect with that group of people in a way that works is just really hard. When it's good, though, it's great. I mean, it really is fun when a class is going well and people are engaged and sharing learnings, and it's really neat. But it's not easy. Of course, if it were easy, it wouldn't be any fun, really. It would be boring. But the fact is, I could teach the same darn stuff one day, and it goes great, and then the next day, and it's a little flat, and you're like, why was that? And you're like, I don't know. I can't figure out. Maybe I didn't have enough coffee, or maybe somebody said something early in the class, and then you just go back in the next day and you try to do it again, and you try to make sure the class really works. So for me, Kellogg's been the sort of the foundation of what I do, and really teaching is the heart of my activities now.
It's kind of interesting, though, because you have created a little spark of magic here at Kellogg with the Super Bowl review. So tell us a little bit about that. Why do you feel like it's so beloved and respected, and what makes it so unique and special?
So the Kellogg Super Bowl ad review is something we've been doing now for many years. We just celebrated our 20th year of it. And that has become it's a really neat program. We started it with no intention that it would continue for many years. We began it first. There was a team of us working on it right at the beginning in the first couple of years. And the thought was, let's go try this. And maybe there's something in the Super Bowl that would be fun. And maybe we could apply what we're talking about in the classes here to evaluating these Super Bowl spots. I used to do something similar to this back at Kraft when I was there. And that sort of led to the beginning of this. But it's really taken off. It's become a great event. It's great for the students, I think. It's a unique experience, so it becomes really memorable. And it's something the students can talk about and participate in. I think it's great learning because it's a chance to really try to think through some of these spots, which is not so easy to, when you see a piece of creative, to step back and say, wait, is that really likely to work or not? It's not easy. So it's a great experience. Mm-hmm. I think for Kellogg, it's neat because it generates a lot of attention for Kellogg, and it's a way to engage students, but it's a way to, it gets Kellogg into the news, and it connects all the stuff we talk about here to what's happening very real time.
Yeah, it's great. So let's change gears a little bit. A lot of the questions that Volkan and I like to talk about with leaders is their mindset and how they approach leadership. So as leaders, we face many challenges. One of them is, how do we best showcase our ideas? And you are a world-renowned author of the book, How to Clean a Chicken, and an educator in the art of great presenting. Can you give our listeners a quick overview on why you think presenting is so important in your career path?
So I think the ability to present your ideas clearly and persuasively is just astonishingly important. Because when you get into a company, or if you're an entrepreneur trying to raise money, it's the same thing. If you can present your ideas in a way that is simple and clear and engaging, what happens is, the ideas tend to move forward, but also people tend to think that you're smart and you're talented and you're gifted, and it does really good things for you personally, but also for the projects and the ideas that you're working on. And, I think it's maybe not fair, to be honest, because some people just know how to present. And as a result, they get regarded in a really positive way. Whether they actually have the best ideas, that is unclear. But what is clear is they can present their ideas really well. And so they tend to have a really big impact because they can get up and stand in front of a group and lay things out in a way that makes sense. And that gets approved and moves forward. For people who don't know how to present or how to present well, I think it's inherently a bit of a struggle. And one of the things I lay out in the book, it's how to wash a chicken.
Oh, excuse me. How to wash a chicken.
That's okay. Yeah, cleaning chickens, washing chickens.
How to wash a chicken.
It all gets you there.
This is super important. How to wash a chicken in multiple languages.
Yes, you can get it in multiple languages.
Including Turkish. I saw a Turkish version in your office earlier today.
The Turkish edition is out. But one of the things I lay out in that book is how, when it comes to presenting, there's a bit of a circular dynamic, which is to say, if you think you present well, if you think of yourself as a good presenter, what happens is you tend to seek out presentations. And when somebody asks, well, who wants to present this? You're like, I'll do it. And if somebody says, who wants to lay out this presentation? You're like, I'll do it. And what happens then is you get more experience doing it, and you get more comfortable doing it, more confident doing it, which makes you be more successful when you're presenting. And then when the next thing comes along, you volunteer again. You're like, hey, I'll do it. And then it just is this amazing spiral, and you get better and better. But the flip is also true, which is if people who don't like presenting or don't know how to present, they do a presentation, it doesn't go so well, and then they think, maybe I'm not a good presenter. So then they're less likely to do a presentation. Mm-hmm. They procrastinate. They don't like to work on it. And when they do finally get around to it, it doesn't go great. And then they say, I guess I'm not a good presenter. And then it spirals the other way. But what's interesting is we don't generally teach people how to do it well, I think. There are classes out there where people talk about how to sort of give a talk, like how to walk around a room and wave your hands and try not to say too much and things like that. Mm-hmm. We do teach people that. And we sometimes will teach people how to lay out data. Like my colleague Steve Francarini does a lot, persuasive visualizations. Mm-hmm. But the whole thing of how do you lay out a total presentation, how do you put that together, is not covered very well in most of our courses, or even more broadly in the world. And that's why I wrote the book, to try to get to that piece of it, really, and to help people more successful doing it.
I mean, it's really interesting, too, because you sort of bridge the gap between being able to present and your personal brand. What is that relationship for you, and how do people think about building their personal brand?
Well, I think people have to prioritize building their personal brand. People have different feelings about it. Some people say, this personal branding stuff is too much. But I think the reality is that everybody has a personal brand. And whether we want to think about it or not, it exists, and it has a huge impact on our career. And if we're regarded at our place of work as somebody who is really smart and dynamic and a good team player, we will find ourselves getting good opportunities and bonuses and promotions and opportunities. And if our brand develops in such a way that people question our analytic abilities, or they question our attention to detail or our commitment, whatever it might be, that is a huge negative effect to it. What's unique about presenting is, especially for senior people, the question is, how do you really shape your brand with them? Because they're very important. And the reality is there's not many opportunities to do it, because you just don't interact with senior people all that often. Most people new in a company. But those moments when you have the opportunity to get up and do a presentation, that's when you really have this moment where everybody's looking at you. And when you stand up, it will go well or it won't. And that has a big impact on your brand. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
there's a lot of pressure, though, sometimes on people, too. So how do you coach people through ensuring that they don't feel so much stress when they have these one-off, one-opportunity moments in their career?
So it is incredibly stressful. The thing that I always think about, though, this comment by Lucy Kellaway, the columnist at the Financial Times. Mm-hmm. I guess she's now a teacher. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I saw her at one point, she was writing, and she said, being nervous about speaking in public is entirely rational. And it's true. it's like when you're giving a presentation, you should feel nervous. That's how you should feel. If you don't feel nervous, then you should be nervous. The question is, how do you present well, even when you're feeling really nervous and amped up? But being nervous is good because it makes you focused and intense. But what you then will do, hopefully, is you'll do the things ahead of time that will help you be successful on the day of. For example, you'll really work on the slides and you'll make sure your story is really clear. And one slide is going to sequence to the next one, and that's really going to work. You're going to go and check all of the numbers. And you're going to make sure for every number in that presentation, you know where it came from, what it means, how it interacts with other numbers. You're going to put together some simple notes that you can have near you and be ready to go. And then you're going to pre-sell that presentation. So you're going to go meet with people in that meeting ahead of time. So when you get up to stand up, if you've done all of that, well, then you still are feeling nervous. And yet at the same time, there's every reason to think that I am feeling nervous, but I'm also feeling confident. I compare it to the feeling that you might have at the start of a big race. So if you do a marathon or a triathlon or something, I do triathlons on occasion. But for me, it's like that feeling at the start. You know, before a triathlon, I always have the same feeling. I'm like, on the one hand, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have not trained enough. I am probably going to drown. This was just a bad idea. I don't know why I signed up. I should be in bed right now. But on the other hand, then I'm like, I've done it like 15 times. I know I can do this. I know I can, but on the other hand, I can't do it. I can't, no, this is a bad idea this year, not this year. And they're like, no, I've done it. Like, just get out there. It's like that feeling. Mm-hmm. But that's actually a pretty good feeling because when you're given a presentation, you sort of want to feel that way.
That's right. So what do you think about leadership of the future? I mean, so many expectations are put on senior leaders, and the way to define leadership has changed significantly over time. If you were to narrow it down to a couple of words, maybe one or two, what do you think are the most important characteristics of a leader today?
For a leader today, I would probably give you two, if I can. One is, taking responsibility. And I think the characteristic of a leader is somebody who steps up to sort of own a situation. And it's interesting. It's so easy in life to avoid taking ownership for things. And it's so tempting to do that. But when you stand up and you take ownership for it and you're like, I'm all in and I'm committed to doing this. I think that's one hallmark of a great leader. The other piece I think right now, really important, is the idea of nurturing talent. And I think that is incredibly important. The thing about leaders, and the thing that I found hard, to be honest, when I was at Kraft and when I was moving up the ranks, is eventually you can't do the work. You can't do it. There's too much work to be done. You're relying on other people. And sometimes you're relying on other people to tell other people to do things. So you just can't do it, which means the people then become so important, your team. And how do you make sure that your team is engaged and feeling supported and, that they're working together well? That I think is really important. But I think post-COVID in the world today, that's really, really important because I think with young people in particular, it's really hard. And getting young people to feel supported and operating as a team is a huge challenge for leaders. And, and I think a lot of leaders, I think it's a challenge right now because a lot of leaders grew up sort of pre-COVID, pre-social media, a lot of these things, and may not understand what some of the young folks have gone through, which has made their go really tough. Mm-hmm. And how do you tap into that? Mm-hmm. Like an example now, at many companies, people are working remotely and all of that. And I guess that's okay. But if I were a manager, I'd really want to see people in person on a very regular basis because it's when you're together that you create shared culture and shared experiences. And it's very hard to do that on Zoom.
It's the great debate right now. Do you go back to the office or not? So yeah, it's some really interesting topics. So I want to change gears one more time. I'm a marketing geek. I love it. I geek out on it. I studied it. It's why I came to Kellogg to get my MBA, my executive MBA, because it was such a phenomenal school when it came to marketing. So if you'll go with me on this geek journey, It's very interesting right now the way people are defining the role of marketing leaders. In fact, Adweek recently released an article regarding what is the role of a CMO or a senior leader in marketing. They acknowledged that the role is changing and many companies are shifting the way they speak about their top marketers. How would you best describe the role of a marketer today?
So I think the role of a marketer is to build a great business and a great brand. And I think that's what marketing has always been about. So when I think of marketing, I think of it very similar to general management. And it's hard sometimes to isolate marketing as just being about the communication side of things. Because when you do that, you lose the connection to the product and customer service and the customer experience. And so many things are now not included there, especially in the world today when traditional, predictable media is fading away. You know, the idea that you could have marketing people developing TV ads off in the corner, that's just not the way things are operating. I mean, marketing now is so experiential and so much about what's happening at a mix of customer service and IT and the apps and all of that, that I think you want to keep your marketers very much aligned at sort of the center of the business. And it's really around how do you build, you know, that great business. Now, it's interesting. So a lot of the senior marketers, not a lot of them, but there have been sort of CMOs that have been, that position's been phased out. But I have to tell you, I've never totally understood the role of a CMO. Because when you have a CMO, what you're doing is you're sort of pulling that person away from the business. I always like to think of marketing as very much tied to the business. So if I am selling, you know, a particular, you know, microphone, well, the marketing is very much part of that team of like, well, how do we designing the microphone and how are we making sure it's got the right price points and the features? And these are all great marketing issues. And I like to have it close to the business. So the CMO often has been a role that's set the procedures and the policies and maybe the agency relationships, but hasn't really done the hard work of marketing, which is really trying to figure out how do you meet customer needs in a very profitable way that's competitively unique. So it's sort of as a function. So I'm not upset when I hear about the CMO role fading away at a particular company. That just means to me that the marketing tasks are being done by the people closer to the business, which is not a bad thing at all.
It's kind of interesting. I had this conversation with someone about what is advertising and marketing, and someone once described it to me as the cookie in someone's day, like the true business leader's day. It's exciting to have a taste of the creative development and the TV shoots, to your point. But it's also interesting because the way I have defined marketing is the meat and potatoes of the business. It's not just the cookie. You're actually understanding the consumer need, the insight, the drive, the business potential, the ROI, et cetera. So for our non-marketing friends, what would you want them to know about marketing today? And how would you describe it to them so they sort of understand that we're not building shiny objects in the room, we're actually igniting growth in the business?
Oh, so what marketing does, I think, is it connects products and services and ideas to customer needs, or it's profitably meeting customer needs, right, with products, services, and ideas. And I think the key thing is that, you know, people focus a lot on product or R&D, but the reality is that those things are great, but they won't really get you anywhere unless it turns into a product offering that customers want and they're willing to pay for and they see as important and they see as unique. You know, the whole idea of customer advantage. You know, the people value the benefit you provide. They're willing to pay for it. They see you as best at providing it. And I think what marketing does is really help make sure that that's being built day in and day out. Because you can have the best technology in the world, but if it doesn't connect to what consumers want in a unique and special way, if there's no differentiated benefits there, the whole thing's going to fall flat. So that's sort of the role of marketing. And when you think about R&D, yes, you need R&D, absolutely. But R&D is only as good as the marketing insights are that are working with it.
Right.
You know, you can't just have marketing because then you've got nothing. You can't just have R&D because then you've just got a R&D project. It's putting those two things together. And ultimately, you're trying to create these great businesses that are unique and different and special and have these benefits that customers really care about.
I love the way you describe that. It feels really back to basics of consumer need, product to serve need. And what's really interesting nowadays, and you mentioned technology, is AI is the buzzword of all buzzwords right now. In particular, generative AI is the thing people are talking about. What impact do you see AI having on marketing and the industry?
I think it is early to say exactly how this is all going to play out. Will AI matter? Sure. Will we use AI? Will we use generative AI? Of course. So yes, but how it will really shape things, I think, is not clear. I mean, it certainly is a really interesting tool. Like you could have generative AI, you can get on ChatGPT and have it come up with ideas for you, or you can have it come up with images for you, or you can have it do lots of really cool things. What do we do with all of that? I think that's a much more interesting question. And will it really change the job? That's what I don't know. A little bit, I think AI is right where we were with big data about 5 years ago, 4 years ago. 4 years ago, everybody said it's all about the data. It's all this big data is going to show us the way. But now more and more companies, I think, are like looking at all their data and saying, wow, we've got all the big data. That's great. But now what in the world do we do with this? How do we turn it into something useful? And that's not so easy.
Right.
And I think with AI a little bit, we're going to go through that same process. So there's no doubt that we're going to use it, just like we use big data all the time. Is it going to fundamentally rewrite things for us? I think that's a lot more difficult to say. You know, and I'm not convinced that it totally changes everything. Some people say it's going to change the world, and that could be true. It could be. You know, but it's not. I'm not saying that it necessarily will, because at the core, I still think a lot of marketing comes down to stuff that is that AI can help us do, but won't necessarily tell us the answer. Well, fundamentally, let's be honest. The problem with life in general is that we know what's happened and we can look back at history, but we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And I don't know that, and you don't know that. I mean, I have some idea. Hopefully the sun will come up, and you know, there are many things we can anticipate will happen, but we don't really know the future. And that's true for AI. I mean, generative AI doesn't know the future either. So we're all going to struggle with that, which makes then the process of making decisions is still going to be there. The task of understanding what will people need in the future is still going to be there. The question of what products and services will we need a year, 2 years from now, still going to be there.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because you're dealing with machine learning, but it's humans. And it's humans predicting the future and humans trying to figure out what's next and what need they will have and how do we best solve that. So it's a really interesting debate on machines versus humanity and how you have that conversation.
Well, and humans aren't, you know, we're not totally rational. We're not totally digital. It's one of the things people find sometimes, I think, frustrating in my classes when you're developing strategy. It's not like there's one formula that you can use that will tell you the strategy. Just use this formula and whatever answer comes out, that tells you what. That's just not, no, it's just not how it works, because there's so many variables, there's so many unknowns, there's so much uncertainty that it's just a lot more to it than that. And you've really got to, by the way, the fact that we don't know lots of things doesn't mean we don't have to make decisions, because you still have to make decisions. You've got to move forward in a world where you don't know what's going to happen. But you have to think through then, what are the potential scenarios? How might it develop? And what might the world look like? And what strategic choice would be right and optimal given how the world might develop in different ways and the probabilities and the uncertainties? That's where strategy gets really fun. And then you get into, and then how might people respond if we did this? And how might that, and then you get to 4 levels of chess, and then it gets to be really fun strategy.
It's actually one of my favorite conversations, and I could talk to you about it for hours. But thank you. I will pause our marketing conversation to bring us to the end to say, what questions do you think that Volkan and I should have asked you, but perhaps didn't? What things should our listeners know and understand about the way you see the world?
Oh, I think you've covered, a lot of the big topics. One thing we haven't touched on is the whole world, though, of healthcare. So one of the things that's happened since I've gotten to Kellogg is that more and more of my time and energy has gone to the world of healthcare for a lot of different reasons. But now I teach this biomedical marketing class, and that's all about how do we market medical devices and pharmaceuticals and diagnostics and providers and all of that. And I think there's a really interesting number one, I think it's a really interesting area fundamentally, but also I think it is a really interesting space for anybody who's in the world of business to be aware of and to think about, because healthcare issues are only going to get bigger in the years to come. Mm-hmm. Everybody says, oh, we spend so much of our GDP on healthcare, but that's only going to go up in the years to come. And of course it should. That's a good thing. A lot of people say, oh, isn't it sad we spend so much money on healthcare? I'm like, no, are you nuts? No, it's what better to spend on than trying to take care of, sick children or struggling adults, or give me a better thing to spend money on. I wish we spent a lot more money on healthcare and maybe a lot less on, building like fighter jets and bombs, but healthcare issues are going to be big in the years to come. And so I think it's an area that is both really interesting, but also I think is important for people in business to get involved in, however that intersects with your life.
Fascinating, just fascinating.
A lot of references to the future, and I'm curious about your view on the potential future MBA education. What could and should be Kellogg's role in it, in your opinion?
Oh, I'm a huge believer in the MBA, and that the MBA is going to be a very vibrant degree in the years to come. Partly because, to be a good leader, there's a lot of things that are necessary that you don't know without getting an MBA, or you don't have exposure to. And some of it is just basic stuff. It's like understanding finance and the ability to read an income statement and a balance sheet and a cash flow statement. You don't really learn that usually in an undergraduate program, but that's just basic finance, and you should know some of that, and that's really important. And the ability to think about, negotiations, managing crises, managing people, and a lot of these issues are just fundamental MBA things. So I think the MBA is a super vibrant degree, and I think it's going to be important for a very long time. And there's so many organizations that need competent leadership. And that doesn't matter if you're running a nonprofit, a for-profit, a small company, a big company, whether you're in a B2B, everybody needs competent leadership. Leaders who are honest, who can understand the numbers, who can figure out how to connect with people. It's just a really important degree and set of skills. For Kellogg, I think, is an amazing institution. And I think I think that Kellogg's approach to leadership is, super promising for impactful leaders. The challenge really is, how do you bring a group along with you? And I think that's the task of a leader. That's the hard part of a leader. It's not really about heroically pointing the right direction. It's about engaging people, listening, trying to figure out together the right way forward, ultimately taking responsibility and taking the path, but doing it in a way where you bring everybody along with you. And I think that's incredibly important. Kellogg, of course, is great expertise in marketing, and I think marketing is hugely important in lots of different ways. And I think that combination of sort of strength in marketing together with, the sort of a certain type of leadership, together with all the great MBA knowledge that you need to get, that's sort of those are the three things that sort of come together at Kellogg.
I think it's the special spark of Kellogg, quite frankly, that makes it so unique, is the collaboration of the people. You have a fantastic foundation of business. You have the highlights of wonderful marketing approach, but it is truly the individuals that you meet that make it such an amazing experience and that propel you to be a better leader in the future.
Right. Yeah. And I think Kellogg, in an interesting way, becomes this wonderfully sort of reinforcing environment, because I think what happens is Kellogg attracts certain people. Mm-hmm. And the people that Kellogg attracts, and the people that tend to find this type of community really engaging, are the people who are oriented that way, which makes them, they're wonderful people to have in the community, and makes them also super powerful as leaders.
Right. So we're going to wrap up in a second. I personally want to say thank you. It's been an amazing honor and experience to be able to have this conversation with you. As we leave, what are your words of wisdom that you could leave us and our listeners with?
For words of wisdom, in terms of marketing, I think the big thing is to always keep an eye out for, differentiated benefits. And in a product or a service, if you have these benefits the customers are looking for, that are unique, that are different, if you can find and build those, at the core, that's the heart of building really a great business. So I would say that's number one. And then the other thing I'd really stress is the opportunity to become really effective at communicating your ideas. And the thing that I love about presenting and communication is that a lot of it is not particularly complicated. It's just not. It's just that we don't think about it and we don't spend the time to get better at it. So if there's one place I think almost all of us could get stronger is to really be deliberate about how we approach that and how we think about that. In a way, you could bring those two ideas together. Anytime you're thinking about communicating your ideas, you think about, okay, what's in this for my audience? Mm-hmm. And when I apply that lens to this meeting, presentation, conference, how do I make sure that what I'm going to bring is going to be a benefit for them, or that I can somehow tap into what they're looking for and try to provide that? And there's magic in that if you can pull that off.
Agreed.
Thank you very much for coming on the podcast today. It's an honor and privilege. Thank you very much, Kelly, Professor Calkins. This was a fantastic episode. Thank you very much for your time and hosting us in the Global Hub at Kellogg today.
Well, thank you so much. This was great fun and happy to be part of it.
Thank you for diving deep with us on another episode of Lehigh, Low Ego, High Impact Mindset. Join us every week as we discover the stories, strategies, and insights that will empower you to grow personally and professionally. Stay inspired and catch you in the next one.